Social Innovation Lab. Um, and I'm also a fellow at the Ethereum Foundation. So wearing a lot of different hats, but ultimately I've been engaged in the makerspace ecosystem since 2015 after the Nepal earthquake response, focusing on how making the concept of making makers and the makerspace ecosystem can be utilized for humanitarian purposes. So I will start with, and I've been in Bangladesh for the past 3 years. I'm from Nepal, but and in Bangladesh I came in and specifically now focusing on engaging the makerspace ecosystem in Bangladesh. But the concepts and the thinking that I've been working on in Bangladesh with Field Ready and with BRAC, I think are a lot are and go beyond Bangladesh, and we're working looking at this whole ecosystem from a systems perspective and trying to figure out what are the different avenues and what are the possibilities of engaging makers in the humanitarian space, and then also looking at what are the what are the hurdles, and then trying to go forward on this. So I will start with multiple different things that I'm doing, but I will first start with the development of the makers ecosystem in Bangladesh. Then I will move into the distributed manufacturing work that I've been doing with BRAC in Bangladesh. And then I'll go into how we've been looking at manufacturing from a systems perspective, so as to understand the different understand the different stakeholders and actors in the system that comprises the makers ecosystem, and then explore what are their different incentives and the negative and positive incentives that they have to be part of this. So I will start with sharing my screen. If anyone can make me a host for this so that I can share the screen.
We're doing it now.
Ricardo. Yeah.
You can just share his screen as well.
Go. You should be okay.
Yeah. Just share the whole screen. So these are different presentations that I've been working on. So you'll see a different. I'm me moving into different windows. So if you have any questions or you're not following through, just you can stop me and I can come back again. So this is the work that we've been doing in Bangladesh from on my position at the technology for development person at BRAC, with the BRAC Social Innovation Lab. This project, it was funded by the Internet Society Foundation and a partnership with the NextFab Foundation and their and their unit in Greece, which is called Odyssey. I think Andrew knows about it. A lot of people know about them in the room. In terms of the context for this, so we started with getting the skills grant. It's very small grant, $150,000. Then we worked into then mapping local spaces and local maker spaces and fab labs in Bangladesh, and then focused on developing partnerships with them. After that, the aim was to understand the need to invest in long-term capacity development of the makers in Bangladesh. The makers ecosystem in Bangladesh is very raw and not even more raw than what Nepal was. So when I went to East Africa, it's completely the difference, the gulf between the ecosystem in Bangladesh is very high compared to the ecosystem in Africa. So there is a lot of things that we had to do starting from scratch. And once we did that, we mapped the capacity of the local maker spaces, and based on that, we created a kind of training regime for the makers in terms of manufacturing. How do you and their understanding of the machines, and also focusing on how can we ensure quality. So and during that process, we also did a small experiment on distributed manufacturing with about 7 different maker spaces, and in total they managed to produce about 4,000 different PPEs for the frontline workers of BRAC. And in that experiment, we tested various different variables around the challenge, to understand the challenges from procurement to logistics to delivery to demand generation, right? All from the whole supply chain work. So after that, in parallel, we were working with the NextFab Foundation to actually also develop a customized course for makers who, based on the understanding of their capacity that we did, the capacity mapping that we did, and through like in-person conversation with the makers, through different surveys, the team at the NextFab Foundation created 25 courses for specifically for maker spaces and the different equipments that are available at the maker spaces. And currently the learners are getting enrolled. There's a TOT happening right now, which we are trying to create a workforce that works in maker spaces. The reality is that in Bangladesh, the World Bank, I think in 2016, established 8 different fab labs all across the country, and unfortunately forgot to provide any sort of, what you say, I mean, the project kind of missed out in terms of providing operational funding for the maker spaces. So when Andrew and we went to one of the fab labs for the first time in 2019, we saw that a lot of equipments were actually gathering dust and not even being used, taken out of the packaging, right? Some of the 3D printers. So that's the unfortunate reality where sometimes we think that the resources are the problem in terms of the infrastructure, but when there is infrastructure, then the operational challenges come into the effect, which then, despite spending 250,000 pounds, $250,000 in one fab lab, almost none of them except one was, being utilized properly. So based on that, in order to engage and, what you say, kind of restart the ecosystem, we then also launched the Makers Residency Program. It was a 2-phase project, which first started with Explore Idea phase, where we attached the makers to different fab labs, and then in that Explore Ideas phase, we provided them initial funding to just explore the idea, which a lot of makers don't really get. And that based on that explore ideas phase, we had about 18 different team members, and out of that, 9 teams are currently developing functional prototypes. So while this is happening, we're tackling on the capacity building part of the makers ecosystem. Then we're also tackling the challenge where the idea of a maker. When we design a persona of a maker, you have to also understand not just the good side of a maker, but also the wandering side of the maker, right? You have to keep invigorating the not just like the when you go into that manufacturing space, it becomes monotonous. And from the perspective of makers, you have to also keep them engaged in doing something new again and again and again, so that they have both the hunger for making new things, but also they have the stability and foundation for, by in terms of income or any other thing, by just actually making products. So this whole design was to kind of strike a balance between that. While that was happening, I also had an opportunity to travel to East Africa to kind of further explore, further explore the opportunity to kind of scale this kind of project in Africa, where BRAC is present. BRAC, just to reintroduce BRAC in this space, is one of the largest NGOs in the world. We have about 100,000 employees in the front as frontline workers, and is in about 14 different countries. It has a big presence in East Africa, and it's slowly growing in North Africa as well, and West Africa. So this is the general context and progress of the project. We had to essentially rebuild an ecosystem from scratch. Essentially, we have gotten very good feedback from different makers, people who now are not like cross-sector. We got a lot of cross-sectoral engagement. We had an agriculture scientist working with the Fab Lab in SAU to work on creating a mushroom in a box project, right? So that we can distribute mushrooms to the refugees for better nutrient products, right? Food system. So a lot of different commingling happened in this part, and building an ecosystem from scratch, rebuilding it was a very challenging effort, and it has taken almost 14-15 months. It's a long process, And then we had a lot of setbacks in between. You can see like we also were in the COVID situation, so we worked with the makers to explore different sort of products for the frontline workers. And you can see here it's an open source oxygen concentrator design, and that had to be localized and added functionalities with human machine interface. And a lot of kind of also we created a lot of knowledge base in this project to also map where the spare parts and can be purchased in Dhaka in Bangladesh, so that anyone else can also make it. So it was not just about building, but also creating standards, creating a quality layer, so that it allows other people to also make the same products that has been made. So we got a lot of different products. We got an oxygen concentrator, we got a cryo bag, we got a foot operated tab 2, we got a gear for a blind, which is made by a 14-year-old. So I mean, what we were looking at is right now, and we're looking at how do we scale this out. And in terms of scaling out, we are trying to look at the major themes of open source knowledge, looking at how do we look at capacity building, how do we get more become more inclusive in the project because I feel like gender is a big part of making. A woman who has access to a CNC machine is a carpenter, and you don't find women carpenters in South Asia. She can make a door, she could make a window, not fancy stuff, but just normal furniture. A woman with a CNC is capable to do it, and that's a big technology becomes a great equalizer in that sense. And then the idea was to also provide access to infrastructure in person or also online, and then creating a right market the for the makers ecosystem in the country. And then the final loop of closing is, how do we make sure that people who've gotten capacity, build their capacity, get employed? And here lies a very kind of a very important part of it. A lot of people, makers, when they build the capacity, and when we try to scale it out large, let's say 3,000 people, we don't expect everyone to go into just the space of making. The skills that you gain from learning how to make can be utilized for a lot of different other jobs and sectors, right? So you gain an inherent basic set of problem solving skills to what we call jugaad, hacking. So those kind of skills can be utilized in a lot of different fields. And I'm sure the people in the room agree, because we all come from different backgrounds. But the inherent idea of making gives us skills that are beyond just the skills of making, right? So we estimated that almost about 80% of the people that will get the capacity building might not even look at making as their future, but then use those skills to then get jobs somewhere else. Then we have about 5% who are the entrepreneurs who can make a business out of it. And then the next, you got about 15 to 10% who want to make and want to earn a living out of making. So for those, so in once someone's built their capacity, those are the three avenues that we think that I think that is very important, that we need to look at each of those three parts very closely and then cater to the audience, our services. So what we were doing was, in terms of closing that loop, um, we wanted to one kind of integrate what our partners Odyssey, Nextwave Foundation's employability platform, into the learning management system that we developed, so that once you have your capacity built, you can enter it into the system, the employability platform. This platform has also does like skills analysis based on psychometric data, gamification. So what that will lead to is a profile of a maker who would then be able to use to show that they have gained all of these skills by learning the process of making and utilizing all these machines, and then get hired, maybe not always at a job where makers are needed, but somewhere else, right? So this linking of employability and capacity building is what the next part of what we've been trying to work on. And the idea was to bring then once you have that 80% of people who would then get their employability through this platform. You got 5% who really are entrepreneurs, who are, what is it, the trailblazers, create new products and new designs, right? So the Makers Residency program was catered to cater to that audience, where you got these innovators who are focused on solving a problem, and then have an opportunity to potentially link up with projects at BRAC or projects outside of BRAC that can actually buy these products from the makers and then provide it to their beneficiaries or their staff, right? And then in the third part of how do you then use the skills of making to then provide employment opportunities for making, this is where the distributed manufacturing platform comes in. So we've been working, let me just share the other part now.
2 minutes.
Sorry, 3 minutes? Okay, sorry. So in terms of looking at distributed manufacturing, we look at how we can look at the way distributed manufacturing can become a systems change. So we designed this whole map. We mapped this whole ecosystem from a systems change framework, which has institutional actors, which then contribute to which has also pathways, and then leading to individual outcomes. The idea of a system change using distributed manufacturing in the procurement systems of these large agencies was to ensure that effective changes in the systems around making will contribute to conducive structures for makers that enable improved pathways, which leads to one, serving the beneficiaries on the ground, but also provide income opportunities for the makers. So we've worked on creating a distributed manufacturing ecosystem for Bangladesh here, which has a huge component around creating different layers of manufacturers, principal manufacturers and a secondary manufacturer, based on the ability for them to get into a contract with an organization. But also a huge component of this is the quality control. So you can see on the right side, on my right side here, a big part of this is about quality control and approval, and making sure that the product that the makers are making are up to the mark that the organizations want. I mean, there's a lot of challenges around this model, but we're still figuring things out. And then once you have this system, the technology is not going to be a challenge. I believe the challenge is the people, right? So once you have a system that works, what are the barriers to then adoption, right? So a big part of barriers of adoption is to look at how is the challenge that we face on being able to communicate the impact of the concept of making to a procurement agency in BRAC or a UNHCR or a UNICEF. And right now, these organizations do not provide any sort of additional marking or something so that it encourages local manufacturing and makers, right? What we've done is last month, we also did a impact mapping based on the environmental sustainability and governance indicators based on what we call, it's a GRI framework, GRI standards. So we created an economic impact map, a social impact map, and an environmental impact map of a distributed manufacturing ecosystem, and what it will do to
Let me just interrupt for a second there, Kuldeep.
Yes.
Because at this point, you're going further beyond the scope of our project in a way, in the sense that what you're looking at here is your market making, and you're facing a situation in Bangladesh where there is a huge manufacturing base, where you have to make the case for local manufacturing. And you're making it not necessarily through the cost, the cheaper, better, faster argument. You're making the case through economic, social, and environmental benefits of local green. And in some cases, that those aren't always needed in places where there are big supply chain problems. But we're going to have to ask you to wrap up. Can I just ask you a couple of questions? Is there anything else you'd like to?
No, I've got a lot. I have so much to share. I wish I was there in person, but again, next time.
A couple of quick things. You presented to us that you've developed training courses. Our project's developing training courses. Are your training courses open source? Can we learn from them? Thank you.
All are Creative Commons license free.
Perfect. You mentioned that you've created a learning management system. Our project is also to create a learning. Is that
Open source,
available?
open source, open source.
Thank you.
Anything I'm doing is open source.
You've drawn diagrams. You've drawn diagrams of contracting systems. Part of my work package is to develop a contracting system. Is it open source?
Open source, open source.
We need to know. We didn't just copy everything you're doing and talk about project.
We are changing color.
Yeah. Kuldeep, one thing that Geraldine and I have discussed that I would like everybody in the room to also consider, and maybe we can decide right now, is we'd like to we'd like to recommend the MAKE consortiums that you become an advisor to our project. We won't pay. We'd be very grateful for your time and to listen to you. And if you could advise us on some of these things that you're already so far in advance of us in what we've been doing over the last 3 years, to help us over the next 3 years, we'd really appreciate it. Does anybody have any objections to Kuldeep becoming an advisor?
Maybe just play a little bit more.
Okay. We'd love to invite you to become an advisor. You don't need to decide now, but we can talk about this a little bit in more detail.
Yeah, I also really want to say thank you. This is Geraldine speaking, Kuldeep. It's so great to have you here. I'm so sorry we couldn't bring you in person, but I'll wave again. But I think we really like to see how perhaps we can bring you to the second consortium meeting that we have later this year. And I'm preempting now because I don't want to take your curation authority away from you, the truth. But I feel like it would be great to have you give a talk there and to really see how we can embed all the knowledge you've created deeply in the project. So, yeah,
Would love to. Whatever I mean, I really believe in open source knowledge creation, and whatever we're doing is open source here. All the products that are made in the residency program, they will be OSWA certified, right? So and I think the work that we've been doing again goes beyond Bangladesh's borders. But I also would recommend MAKE to look at South Asia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan as potential linkage countries as well, which really require that support, that international support, and kind of infrastructure access that you are currently going to provide to Africa. I think there's an opportunity here as well to engage.
It would be great to explore further then how we can not just benefit from the great work that you've done, but how the work that you've done in Bangladesh, also in other regions in South Asia can benefit from the work that we plan to be doing, and how to really create better links there. You have a question, Kate, or a comment? So that was, I don't know if you were too far away from the microphone, so I'm just going to repeat. That was Kate from Fab City Network speaking, and I'll be passing on your contact for the Fab City meeting that will be taking place in Bali in October, and hopefully some of us are going there. So yeah, let's see this as a very first initial conversation, and then see how to connect the dots today.
Yeah, and one last thing, I really also I'm speaking on behalf of BRAC here. I've been talking to BRAC about the MAKE project as well. BRAC has a huge presence in Africa in terms of its operational capacity on implementation. And if there is an opportunity where BRAC International could be part of some sort of engagement here, meaning that it frees up makers from the making part to do the
Which
making part.
countries did you visit in Africa? It was
So I was
Tanzania,
in Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. But BRAC has presence in Liberia. We're setting up new in Ghana, South Sudan, North, South, and a lot of other places. I don't actually have it in mind. But a lot of the time in projects like this, makers needs to just make and build their capacity, and sometimes people just need to run the operations. And in terms of doing that, BRAC's also available in that region as well, if needed be. that's one thing that I got permission from BRAC to say about this. So,
So I think we'd like to talk with you once we have the MAKE system up and running. We'd like to see about whether we could have some of your academy, your fellowships ideas into some of the maker spaces in the network here. And if you can also persuade BRAC to come and help out in Europe, that would be great. We need all the help we can get. Thanks, Kuldeep.
And yes, let's explore all these connections further. I think there's definitely a lot of openness to how we connect also with BRAC directly then in the countries that it's present in, also in Africa. And yeah, and do this like step by step to see how we can piece things together.
And one last like learning that I have had, I just want to add, sorry, I'm just taking a bit of time, is that, you know, the learning, we've learned a harsh lesson from making a learning management system and creating a content, that we tried a lot, but makers don't always respond to just pure online content and capacity building. They need to, it needs to be paired with in-person on the job training that, and that complement, and the online should complement the offline. Otherwise it won't work. So that has to be, that's a big lesson that I've also recently learned from doing this. And I think the residency program to the learning building, like learning management system, all the kind of failures, and then kind of like solution that we come out of to get out of that problem space. You know, we have that knowledge so that you don't have to, you know, face that again.
Thank you so much for offering to share all this. I think it's going to be so valuable for MAKE as we go along to know that we can, that we can contact you and have these conversations. I think it's great for the others to learn that this exists and this whole universe or these great things you create that exist, tap onto. And I will definitely follow up with you next week when we're not in meeting mode anymore, and then we can see how to concretely continue. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much for giving me this time. Yeah. See you next year, everyone. Bye.
Thanks
Thank you so much, Kuldeep.
Yeah.